in Chulalongkorn University, and this week I have this amazing opportunity to learn with Miss Santiago, Irene Santiago, that is a specialist in peace field and gender issues. So thank you.
I don't think there's any other way to live except to be passionate. You have to be able to get up every morning and know you want to get up. And so that's the reason why passion is important. But for me, I think it's because I believe in the humanity of us all, and that we all deserve to be happy, men and women, boys and girls, all. And so I'd like to spend the rest of my life, if I may, to make sure that the humanity that is all in all of us, whether individually or collectively, does come forth and will make all our lives much better.
So I want to ask you how we can build peace, use gender lens in our communities.
My own definition of peace building is it's a process of increasing connectors and decreasing dividers so that we can have sustainable and equitable development. And it is not possible to increase connectors and decrease dividers unless you consider gender. Women, after all, are half of the population, and it is the relationship of men and women that are at the base of any economic development or any political development or social development. Who are you talking about when you're talking about the people? You're really talking about men and women. And so not taking into consideration that relationship, a power relationship in many ways, then you're not harnessing the full potential of half of your population. And so if you can imagine any kind of development that does not include half of the population, it will be dragging itself, as it were. And I'm not saying that women are more peaceful than men, but in the way the culture has shaped the system that's called patriarchy, it's really, we learn in class that patriarchy is about being male-centered, being male-dominated, being having an obsession with control, by men. It means that a lot of the things that can connect are destroyed by this kind of system. So patriarchy, where men dominate, where men are the center of attention, where men take over decision making, means that you don't have the capacity of women to be part of that decision making. And women, if you look at the way at what women do, they take care of children, they nurture children, they make their households run, they manage community life. How can that not be part of peace building? And so we diminish ourselves if we exclude women from any kind of peace building.
Yeah. And how do you think we can break stereotypes that create violence against women?
Oh, the violence against women. Violence against women, I always say, is really about domination and power. And so violence against women starts in the home, because violence is learned. It is not something that is natural. That men really are violent. No, it's not true. This is learned at home. And so what you learn, you can unlearn. And it is possible to teach our children to be to use nonviolent ways of dealing with one another, of communicating with one another. So violence is a reaction to a situation which really, if we really have alternatives to act violently or to act non-violently, and those are learned at home. So violence against women is a scourge, and it is centered on the belief that men are the center of the universe. They dominate. They should dominate. They should make the decisions, and that they are entitled to enforce that many times through violence.
Yeah. And could you explain more about the movement Mother for Peace?
Well, Mothers for Peace was organized in 2003 when the Philippines was in the middle of negotiations between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Philippine government. At the time, the camp of the MILF was bombed by the armed forces. So we were in the middle of peace negotiations at the time. So why are we at war again? The mothers asked. So we formed the movement and went around the country to tell the public that although this was only in Mindanao, it is a national problem. And that we demanded that there be a ceasefire again, and that the MILF and the government go back to the negotiating table, because it was the peaceful way to resolve that issue. There was no sense going to war again. So the only way was to go and harness public opinion for peace. So we brought the mothers to the television stations, to the newspapers, and all of that, just to let the public know that there was a peaceful way to deal with this issue. So we got unprecedented response from the whole country. So we decided after the campaign, we said, let's form a movement. And so the Mothers for Peace movement came into being.
Yeah. And so in Brazil, for example, the pro-life movement is increasing a lot there. And yeah. And I want to ask you, what are some of the reasons that there has been a global push towards the reversal of reproductive rights?
That swing towards the right is part of the swing towards instead of us taking care of one another, there's always this us and them. It is very exclusive. It's a very exclusive way of dealing with relationships, and so I have the answer, and they're wrong. So and they won't listen. So the hatred that comes from that, and they're trying to exclude other people. I know people will probably think that is too wide, but I look at the swing to the right that just, of course, brought us to this phenomenon of women themselves. Some women saying we are pro-life, but which is all, I think, as though women who are pro-choice are not pro-life. I think we have to make that kind of distinction. I think that the marketing and the messaging has made it possible for people to think that not giving women reproductive rights is about life, because it isn't. So this is really part of the swing to the right, and we should. And there is enough, I think, in the world today. There's enough of us who are now thinking that. I think the women's movement that was very robust around the Beijing conference in 1995. There's really a dynamic women's movement. The women's movement has weakened in the sense that, and I really I blame gender mainstreaming, if I may, because we've seen that we've looked at the issue as a technical issue alone, when in fact it is more than that. It's a political issue. So because we felt gender mainstreaming was about checklists and all that, then the women who were in the women's movement started to hold back and say, oh, okay, gender mainstreaming is happening. It's going to be okay. The institutions are going to be okay. But it's not. There's always a need to influence whatever technical development is going on. So the need for a women's movement is always there. And so now, I think with all the marches and all the protests coming on, I think we're rebuilding and recreating that movement again. But I think to look at an issue as though it were such as women's issues, reproductive health, for example, to look at it as only a technical issue, I think was the wrong thing to do. And that we must never forget, therefore, that we came out of a movement. No? We came out of a movement, and that we must never forget that we came out of a political movement, and that we must continue that.
And what do you think, how we can organize it as a movement globally when we have some issues also related to intersectionality?
It is possible. It is possible to. So intersectionality, of course, means that age and class and race are categories. We are categorized into some of these. But I think if we continue to look at ourselves as part of a whole, it's like a mosaic of a whole, and to start dealing with and start being conscious of the interests that divide us rather than the interests that are common to us, we can build that movement. Yeah. So stop focusing on what divides us and looking at what can connect us to one another. And I've seen this happen in many kinds of campaigns, for example, where you, as I said, we don't have to have ideological discipline, but we all have a common objective.
Yes.
And if that common objective is clear to us, it's possible even if we come from all those different sectors.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Irene, to this conversation. And I learned a lot, and you are an inspiring woman. And yeah, implementing this is developing in my own country and bringing all this life that you also teach us around this week.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.